quick disclaimer just before I start this video. I made this whole video before I realised that this product is a direct copy of the Woodpeckers one. Maybe even the factory where the Woodpeckers one used to be made in. I don't know if they used to produce in China or not, but just please bear that in mind when you're watching. I'm going to have a quick look at the Mohoo sharpening system that I got from Banggood. It comes as two separate pieces, which are both in their own boxes. Lots of styrofoam there, unfortunately, more plastic. And I'm not sure why they come separately, because you kind of need both of them together, but they seem to come as two separate pieces. And I quite like it. I've never had a sharpening system before. The way that I've sharpened up until now has always been freehand. So if I'm sharpening a chisel, I just kind of rest it at about 30 degrees or so and push back and forth. These are diamond steel plates. I've got 250, 600, 1200, and then a leather strop. The idea behind it is that as you push forward, you create a slight curve. So rather than having a fixed angle for the bevel, you have a kind of curve coming to a point. And I think the logic of that is it makes it stronger, because you've simply got, versus having a flat and you've got a curve, you've just got more material coming onto the point. I don't know if any are better or not. I think there's a lot of different sharpening systems and a lot of different ideas out there. And bottom line, if you've got one that works for you, that's fantastic. I've always done mine freehand, but I've also always been a bit skeptical of the result. Like sometimes when I'm doing it, I worry that I'm not at exactly the right angle. Like maybe I'm too low or too high and I'm putting all this effort in and not actually sharpening the very tip. And really what this does is it helps you set the angle and do your sharpening at a more consistent angle than just freehanding it. So I thought I would get this to try out and see what I think about it and share my thoughts. So the way it works is you've got two parts. You've got this block and you've got the runner, and lastly you've got a little angle guide. So I'm going to sharpen my plane iron today, so I will get that out. So what you can do with this is you can take your plane iron or your chisel and you can slot it into one of these to see what its existing bevel is like. For me, it doesn't line up perfectly with any of them. It's interesting, it has some suggested degrees on here, and it says for plane irons, bevel down 25, 25 for bevel up end grain, 30 degrees for bevel up smoothing. Mine is bevel down, so it thinks it should be 25, which is interesting. I'm not sure the actual angle makes that much of a difference. This is probably going to be controversial, but I think if it's sharp, it's sharp. So anyway, I'm going to go with 35 because that looks the closest, and conveniently, that's also what this is set at. So what this does is there's a little locking pin you can take out. You can loosen this and slide it up and down. And if I set it on the line for 35, like so, I can tighten it. Now, the trouble with that is there's two issues with that. One is I might not be exactly on the line. So you see there's a little bit of a gap to the line. And the other one is there's a bit of rotation on this. You want to try and keep this as square as possible to this. And what the pin does is it allows you to lock in. You can see here all of these holes. It allows you to lock in, hopefully, exactly the same position that you used before. So if I drop the pin in, certainly this side, there's a tiny little bit of play on that. Not very much, a little bit of play. On this side, there's quite a lot more play. And so what I'll do there is I'm just going to use got a little square in my pocket. I'm going to square this up as best I can and then tighten it. Perhaps a better idea though would be to have interlocking teeth on the base and on the sliding part, and they could register in at every degree. So you would just line up to your mark, tighten down the thumb bolt, and you would be guaranteed to be square and at the exact same position every time. You could also do away with the pin, which could get lost, I guess, because it's not physically attached. So simpler design, perhaps. And then now what I can do is I can use that to set where this goes. And this is where we're going to find the second issue. Lay it flat, slide it up until it touches, just until it touches. Tighten this. And now this at exactly the right position to give it a 35-degree bevel when I run it up and down like that. You run it up and down and your point there makes contact with a sharpening stone. Run it up and down like this makes contact with the sharpening stone. But you can see here the first issue I've got is When I do that with the plane iron, the width of the wheels is like right on the edge of the sharpening plate. If I'm to run this up and down, I mean, I just can't. It'll just come off straight away. And so that's not great. That's the first thing that I noticed about this. However, I think what you can do is I think you can take this wheel off, and I think you can mount it on the other side to put them on the inside for doing wider blades like this plane iron. And you see there's a little detent here, so possibly it's just designed to do that. So I'm just going to have a quick look and see if I can do that. No washer or anything, it's just a bolt that holds that head in. And I have to say, all of this stuff is beautifully machined. I've already used this, so it's a bit dirty, but you know, that's a lovely piece of brass. And the captive bolt fits in there beautifully. And you can see there, it has a shank on it. 0.2 mm sticks through. And isn't that perfect? That's lovely. Lovely bit of kit. Interestingly, it's just screwed into the aluminium. This red stuff is obviously aluminium. And so you don't want to over tighten that because it's not super strong for holding a thread, but it's strong enough. These ball head hexes are great for this because you can get in there really easily. Okay, so that's the two of those tight. Now, as you can see, my two wheels are the same width as my plane iron, and it'll fit on this sharpening stone much more easily. I'm just going to jump forward a little bit because one of the wheels came off when I was using it. I could sort of feel that maybe wiggling around as I was running it, but I didn't notice the bolt coming out that much. Certainly not enough to come all the way out. So I guess the ideal for this would be to have two of these and put a bit of thread locker on each of them, or maybe I just didn't do it up tight enough, I don't know. And also you can see that my chisel is coming out there, and I guess that's because of the nature of these two jaws, they're going to be tightest here where it's clamped, and then they're going to bend out the way slightly. So once it starts to move a little bit, then it'll come out much more easily. Now it's fine for me because I'm finished and I could just reset it on that, but yeah, it's disappointing that came out. Some kind of a rubber face or something in there would probably grip them a bit better, or even leather. You could glue a piece of leather on the inside of there and that might hold it a bit better. Then later, while I was researching, I spotted this one on Amazon, and if you notice, the face that holds the iron or the chisel has got an angle on it, it's sloped, and so that'll mechanically lock it into place. And in my opinion, this is a way better design, and it's a shame that the Mohoo one doesn't have that sloped face. It's quite interesting that the biggest chunk here, you know, this is a really beautiful, substantial chunk of lovely machined aluminium. You only use for a few seconds. You know, it almost feels like this piece has been somewhat over-engineered. What's interesting is it also has screw holes, and the whole thing comes with four, they look like Phillips or the Japanese one, whatever it's called, JEF or JES or something. Comes with 4 screws so that you can screw this into a permanent location and leave it. And so I think what I might do is remake this sharpening board and mount this on at the end, and then maybe have a little spot to hold this as well, just so that everything stays together. So I'm going to have a bash at sharpening this now, and we'll see how we get on. This is just window cleaner, glass cleaner. That feels nice. To me, it just feels a little bit more reliable than when I do it by hand. I know that it's also grinding it square. Something that I have an issue with is if I'm doing it free-handed, it can be easy to end up slightly squint like this, and then you end up with your chisel not being square to the side. It also, even on a wide iron like this, it feels quite easy to use most of the steel. I obviously can't get to this back section because the wheels will pop off, but I can turn it around and do it the other way. So having the wheels the same width of the steel is really useful in this instance. I like to try and use most of the steel so that it doesn't get, you know, unevenly worn in any area. And so I'm going to move on to the 600 grit. I've not been counting, but I usually do about 20 passes. It's so much faster, this, because when I do it freehand, there's no way I can go nearly that fast. So this feels great that it is so fast. Okay, now I'm going to take it out of this. And what I like to do in my planes is I like to put a slight angle, a slight corner on the edges so that I don't get a sharp corner. So I'm just going to do that Okay, now I'm going to give the back a quick. And last, I'm going to give it a bit of a pull on the strop. Take off the burr, just in case there's any left, which I don't think there is. And that looks pretty good. Another quick test here. Beautiful. A quick word on some of the competitors. I know that Veritas does a system like this. It's designed slightly differently. I've never tried it, so I can't really comment on it. And I'm also unclear on the pricing. It's maybe similar in price. I've seen versions at £70 and then also versions about £110. And I'm not exactly sure what the difference between those versions are. So it looks quite good. This is a lot simpler and a lot smaller in it, which I find quite interesting. And I don't know how well that would work or not. I don't know. And I also noticed that it has a single roller, a longer single roller in the middle, rather than this double roller. I think personally I like the double roller because when they're on the inside position are kind of always the same width as the widest blade. So if it's to put an even wider blade on it, then they would just continue to get wider. You know, they would get further apart and give you more stability. I've also seen that there's quite a few that are quite cheap in the market, sort of £10 to £20 available from different suppliers. And I've noticed that a lot of them tend to have a single roller in the middle. And I worry about balance there, that if you're running just on one wheel, that it would be easy to kind of run a bit squint or to have a bit of tilt on it, a bit of angle on it without realizing. So I do like the fact this has got two rollers. I've also not seen anyone else make a design exactly like this, so it appears to be an original design, which I think is really important. Although after recording that, I did find this one on Amazon that I linked to earlier, that I showed earlier. No idea who created this design first. They both look pretty similar, although this one approaches some things in a slightly different way. This is beautifully engineered. It's heavy, you know, it's chunky. It's a lovely bit of kit. This thing works really well. The fact that you can swap the pins, swap the rollers and put them on the inside makes a huge difference. It makes it so much more versatile for wide blades like your plane. Overall, super impressed. Lovely brass bushings in there. Not too much play on this, tiny little bit of play. And this is kind of handy. You know, it's useful to check your existing ones. Also, if you forget, you know, like maybe you've been doing this for a while and you know, you can't remember what you keep them all to, it is useful having it there just to pop them on and see what your existing angle is before you start. These two parts of it are beautifully machined, really high quality precision engineering. This is very thin and a bit bendy, and I find that quite interesting. It could be a bit thicker, it could be a bit more substantial. I mean, it does the job, but I do worry that it feels a bit flimsy. But these two are, yeah, fantastic. Can't fault the machining on them at all. I think they're lovely. And there's something about having, you know, a nicely designed, like, beautiful tool. I feel like I want to use it more. You know, I feel like, yeah, I want to get that out and use it. Whereas if it doesn't work well and it's ugly and it feels sharp in the hand and it catches and it's, you know, etc., then I'm just kind of not as interested in using it. So yeah, really impressed with these. The cost is about £60 all in. For some reason, it's sold as two separate pieces. So these pieces together as one. And I'm not sure how you would use this without this. Like, you can make your own depth stop here, I suppose, and then just do everything to a single depth. So yeah, I guess you don't need that. That's a good point. You could just figure out and say, okay, I'm going to do them to this depth and it'll be whatever angle it is, and that doesn't really matter, you know, somewhere in the right ballpark. But I definitely think having this as well, it's another £30, but I think having this as well is pretty useful because A, it's a lovely bit of kit, and B, you just get that guaranteed repeatability where it's going to be the same every time. Comes well packaged, but sadly a lot of plastic, and yeah, there's a link in the description. If you've got one, any thoughts, anything I've missed, please let me know. Hopefully you found this video useful. If you did, give it a thumbs up, and please subscribe to keep in touch with the rest of my videos. Thank you. One more thing I'd just like to add in is, would I buy this again? I think that's maybe the truest test. Like, am I happy with the money that I spent on it? And the answer is, I don't know. I like it. I think it's good value. It's a lovely bit of kit. It's well made, but I'm a bit uncomfortable that it's a direct copy of the Woodpeckers one.